Hello, everyone, and welcome to Diplomatic Briefing. As senior officials from China and the United States are about to hold their first face-to-face meeting since the start of the tariff war, both sides are making their own moves. President Xi Jinping is making a state visit to Russia and attending the military parade commemorating the 80th anniversary of the Soviet Union's victory in the Great Patriotic War. After the two heads of state met, they issued a joint statement on further deepening the China-Russia Comprehensive Strategic Partnership of Coordination for a New Era. Both sides firmly support each other in safeguarding national sovereignty, territorial integrity, security, and stability. Although the statement does not mention the United States by name, it criticizes certain countries and their allies for seeking their own hegemonic interests, attempting to alter the outcomes of World War II, undermine the principles of the post-war international order, and weaken the United Nations' central role in maintaining global peace and security. Both sides also pointed out that certain countries and their allies, by imposing unilateral and illegal restrictive measures such as trade and financial restrictions, significantly raising tariffs, and employing other non-market competitive practices, have had a negative impact on the world economy, undermined fair competition, and obstructed international cooperation in addressing common challenges facing all humanity. This includes hindering efforts to safeguard global food and energy security, as well as achieving the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Both sides condemned despicable acts of bypassing United Nations Security Council, implementing actions violating the UN Charter and international law, obstructing justice, and breaching World Trade Organization rules. In addition, Vice Foreign Minister Hua Chunying stated that China is fully confident in its ability to handle trade issues with the United States. She also said that the US government's trade policies cannot be sustained and that the American public is already feeling the pain of the tariff war. Hua Chunying reiterated that China does not wish to engage in any form of war with any country and that the public does not want a trade war. Regarding the US trade talks, if China must face reality, it is unafraid. She emphasized that China is fully capable of overcoming the difficulties of a trade war. To put it simply, China's position has been very clear from the beginning and has not changed. Whether it is negotiation or confrontation, China will be ready to respond. It is the United States whose position keeps changing. According to a report by the New York Post on the 8th, as Chinese and American officials are set to hold trade talks in Switzerland on the 10th, the US government is considering lowering reciprocal tariffs from 145% to as low as 50% as early as next week. The report, citing sources close to the negotiations, said that the punitive tariffs imposed by Trump on Chinese goods are expected to be reduced to between 50 and 54%. At the same time, US trade tariffs on South Asian countries will be reduced to 25%. The relevant reports have not been officially confirmed. White House spokesperson Desai issued a statement saying that tariff decisions are made directly by the president, and any other information is purely speculation. However, on the same day, Trump publicly stated that he expects the China-US trade talks to be held in Switzerland this weekend to be substantive, and also said that it is impossible for the tariff on China to go higher than 145%. He said, "So we know it will come down." The more Trump keeps changing his stance like this, the more it shows that he and his team are so anxious that they've lost their composure. In addition to constantly shifting policies, Trump's understanding of trade has also left the American media at a loss for words. Recently, US ports have issued warnings one after another because Trump's 145% tariff increase on China, along with targeting Chinese ships, will cause a sharp drop in cargo volume, which in turn will severely impact the US economy and consumers' lives. When asked about these issues, however, Trump seemed unconcerned, claiming that a slowdown in port activity is actually a good thing. According to a video released by Fox News and a report by Axios, on that day in the Oval Office, a reporter asked, "We are seeing that cargo volume at US ports is indeed slowing down, and now tens of thousands of dock workers and truck drivers are worried about their jobs." Trump actually responded like this, "When I see that, it means we're losing less money. Frankly, if we don't do business, our situation will be even better." So the slowdown is a good thing, not a bad thing. The American political magazine The New Republic commented that Trump's logic seems to be that reducing trade with China might reduce the US trade deficit with China. The commentary went on to say, however, Trump doesn't even know what a trade deficit means, nor does he know how much the trade deficit is. Trump has always insisted that the United States has been taken advantage of, which exposes his fundamental misunderstanding of economics, a misunderstanding rooted in his aversion to other countries. The report also mercilessly pointed out that Trump's latest comments once again reveal his own foolishness. Data shows that in 2024, the US trade deficit with China was only $295.4 billion. Trump previously claimed that the United States loses $2 trillion a year in trade, but in reality, last year the US trade deficit with the rest of the world was actually $917.8 billion. Online media outlet Axios cited analysis pointing out that Trump's tariff policies have already caused a slowdown in cargo volume at key U.S. shipping hubs and could lead to a U.S. economic recession and disruption of supply chains, ultimately affecting domestic transportation, warehousing, employment, as well as the prices and availability of goods on store shelves. The report also pointed out that the number of container ships has plummeted, especially those coming from China, which means that dock workers' working hours will be reduced. This could soon lead to a decrease in demand for freight trains and railways used for transporting goods. Overall, it seems that Trump is not necessarily as foolish as the American media portrays him. Rather, his policies are impulsive and hallucinatory, decisions made on a whim without considering the consequences, which have thrown the world into chaos, all while being manipulated by Trump's team. This has led to external doubts and criticism. Recently, White House Press Secretary Leavitt reposted a report on the social media platform X, which has drawn attention among Trump's MAGA supporters. But soon, voices emerged pointing out that the claim in the report that American manufacturing is becoming more competitive was misleading, and rumors quickly surfaced to reveal the truth. Leavitt had shared a report published on May 5th by the American right-wing news website Daily Caller. This report claimed that Trump's imposition of a 145% tariff on Chinese imports is boosting the market competitiveness of American-made products. The report stated that many small and medium-sized manufacturers have seen a surge in orders and are preparing to increase production and hire new employees. One of the sources cited was Grand River, a rubber and plastics manufacturer in Ohio, which said it had recently received more order inquiries, including from 2 longtime customers who had switched to Chinese suppliers a few years ago. Additionally, 3 companies that produce oil-based cleaning products had contacted them, hoping to shift their procurement from China back to the United States, and 2 of these companies had already placed orders. The report stated that if these orders are ultimately fulfilled, they will bring in about $5 million in annual revenue for this manufacturer, which has around 200 employees, equivalent to roughly 10% of the company's total revenue. Another tool manufacturer, headquartered in the Midwest and with fewer than 500 employees, said that their factory is operating non-stop, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and they are extremely busy. This is because customers are placing concentrated orders to avoid tariffs, and on the other hand, it is also due to increased demand from the defense industry over the past year and a half. However, quite a few American netizens expressed skepticism about this claim. Some people bluntly stated that an increase in orders for individual manufacturers is hard to generalize and does not necessarily reflect the situation of the thousands of other small and medium-sized manufacturers in the market. One comment, which appears to be from someone within the US manufacturing industry, pointed out that many so-called made-in-America manufacturers still rely on importing components from overseas. Even if small and medium-sized enterprises can bear the core costs of tariffs, they are unable to cope with the enormous cash flow pressure required to front the costs of importing goods at the beginning of orders. At the same time, many large American companies have already made it clear that Trump's tariff policies have caused them losses amounting to billions of dollars. According to Mainland Observer, the content of this Daily Caller report originally came from a feature published by the Wall Street Journal on May 4th. And in the process of reposting, Daily Caller omitted many details that were unfavorable to the Trump administration. For example, American manufacturers, including Grand River, have all stated that tariffs are driving up their production costs. Grand River's president, Donnie Chaplin, admitted that while the company might be able to absorb these rising costs, it would have to pass them on to customers through price increases. The Wall Street Journal report also mentioned that during the COVID-19 pandemic, many domestic manufacturers of personal protective equipment, such as masks and rubber gloves, emerged in the United States. Benefiting from supply disruptions at Asian factories in the early stages of the pandemic, these manufacturers developed rapidly. But after the pandemic, American hospitals and clinics turned back to cheaper Chinese suppliers, putting these manufacturers in a difficult position. In fact, numerous reports in the American media have stated that Trump's tariff policies are facing increasing skepticism, even in the Rust Belt regions he promised to revitalize. A recent poll by the Washington Post shows that nearly 2/3 of Americans disapprove of Trump's handling of tariffs. The Washington Post also recorded an interesting detail from their interviews on the 6th. In Lehigh Valley, a resident named Yanko, who is already retired, generally supports Trump's agenda and even voted for Trump in last year's election. However, he doesn't quite agree with the claim that tariffs will revive manufacturing. Yanko asked the reporter in return, "How much are you willing to pay for something?" To be honest, anything made in America is always more expensive. The conclusion is that Trump and his team are increasingly falling into an echo chamber.